Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're going to finish in shurut al-wudu inshallah ta'ala. One of the masail that we didn't cover last time when we were speaking about dawam al-niyya hukman and adam al-sarif was if someone breaks their niyya after they've already finished. There's two wajh on this, the mu'tamad of course, and it's the sahih, meaning the opposite is weak and rejected, is that the act is not affected at all, like someone changing their niyyah of prayer after they've already finished their prayer. And this was confirmed and stated clearly by Ibn al-Sabbagh, al-Jurjani, al-Ruwayani, al-Nawawi, and others. And there's another opinion that says no, it does get affected, but realistically that opinion is very, very weak, and some have even called it shadh. Wallahu a'lam. Our next, actually one more thing, and that is if someone forgets their intention entirely. Okay, when I say forget, that means it's out of mind completely. Okay, if this happens, then they would need to pause, redo their intention, and pick up from where they last remember that their intention was in mind. Al-Baghawi said this clearly. The opposite opinion says, no, this is not required. Why did they say it's not required? Because we have another example, another mas'ala. And the mas'ala goes like this. You made your intention, it's in your mind, it's in your heart, it's present, you started making wudu, and you just let it faint away. Not that you're forgetting it, it's just that you're not keeping it at the forefront of your mind and your heart. Does this impact you? The Mu'tamad says no, and you don't have to remake your intention. This was clearly stated and authenticated by Al-Bandaniji, Ibn al-Sabbagh, Rafi', Nawawi, and many others. There's another opinion, okay, it's not a weak opinion, it's a decent opinion. They said no, you have to redo your intention. And this was said by Al-Baghawi, Al-Fawrani, and Sheikh Abu Hamid. Okay, so based upon that, when it came to, well, what if you forgot it? So some went back to that scenario that I just mentioned, where it's not at the forefront of your mind and heart. It's not that you forgot it, it's just that you're not thinking about it at the minute. And then we already know that the mu'tamad is that you don't have to redo your intention. So therefore, why would you have to redo it if you forgot about it? Wasn't it only required at the beginning? And they pondered on that. Our next segment in the shurut is adam al-munafi, meaning there cannot be something present that nullifies wudu from the get-go, like female menses, postpartum bleeding, touching your private part, meaning having your hand on your private part while you're trying to make wudu. These things are automatically nullifying wudu from the get-go. They cannot be present, or else the wudu will never begin or initiate. Ibn Hajar mentions this in al-Tuhfa, he mentions it in al-Imdad, he mentions it in al-I'ab, and the majority of the fuqaha, they consider this as a shart. Sometimes, however, or in a lot of the early works, they might not specify this because it's technically a given, right? You have the presence of a nullifier. How can you make wudu in the first place? Does not add up. Okay, but then here comes arguments, and their arguments are like, well, how did you allow a spouse, a woman who, for example, has a mental issue, you allowed her tahara while that mental issue is technically blocking the wudu or ghusl to be valid? Okay, they said it's because her purification is not pertaining to herself, but rather for someone else, meaning it's for her to be with her spouse. And they also use a kitabiyah, marrying a non-Muslim woman, as an example as well. It's not about her, it's about relations that they want to have. Okay, so even though the presence of her kufr or her insanity might be a normal blocking of the validity of wudu. We're allowing it as an exception, not because of her, but because it's connecting with someone else, which is her spouse. Jamil, naam. The next one we're going to be speaking about is making a condition of raf' al-janaba. This issue is not only pertaining to wudu. However, if a person was in janaba and they made hadath, a hadath needs to be, a wudu needs to be done for the hadath and a ghusl for the janaba. However, the wudu wouldn't be valid without the ghusl. Why? Because it's greater. The janaba is greater than the hadath. So the ghusl is greater than wudu. So you need the ghusl to be fulfilled in order for the hadath to also be fulfilled. And while they don't mention this normally, because why mention it if the ghusl already covers them both? It's more of like an umbrella act. It consumes both. Okay? Ibn al-Haddad mentions this in his furu'. And many of the Shafi'i scholars did mention it, especially in their explanations of furu' Ibn al-Haddad. Ibn al-Haddad, a major Shafi'i scholar in Egypt, one of the major scholars after the era of Imam al-Shafi'i. He's a student of Imam al-Nasa'i. And he writes this amazing work called Al-Furu'. It's a powerful work, very early on in Islamic history, very early for all the details that he mentions. He was a scholar, a true scholar. And so the scholars that came after in the 300s and 400s and 500s, they realized they need to explain this book. So people like Abu Tayyib al-Tabari actually have an explanation. So people like Abu Tayyib al-Tabari will have two main sources that will go back to get his opinion. His Ta'liq, which is a Sharh al-Mukhtasar al-Muzani, and then his Sharh of Furu' Ibn al-Haddad. But now, because it's such an older work, and because the issues of ghusl will really cover the issues of hadath, why do we need to mention it? Al-Bulqini sees that there's a good point in mentioning it, and this is why I'm mentioning it to you, to keep it in the back of your minds. But in the chapter of ghusl, you'll find out that the ghusl will actually cover both the janaba and the hadath. The next one, which is very important, we know in fara'id al-wudu you have to have tartib, right? This is a given, we know this. But what about the sunan? Do the sunan need tartib? As a matter of fact, it does. And there's actually a shart from the shurut of wudu, and that is to maintain the tartib of the sunan of wudu. Jamil. And this is the mu'tamad. Imam al-Nawawi says, this is mu'tamad because they made it a condition where you're doing tajdeed al-wudu. And that's a secondary act. So the primary one, because tajdeed is just redoing your wudu while you're already on wudu, right? You're renewing it, but you already have it. So if we're saying when you renew it, this complete act that you're doing that's sunnah in its entirety, you need to maintain tartib of the sunan and the arkan. Well, guess what? If that's the case there, Imam al-Nawawi says that would apply to your regular wudu as well. The sunan in it would need to be in order. Imam al-Nawawi tells us, think about it like this. If you want to get up and pray any two rak'ah lillah, the whole prayer in its entirety, there's no rukn in it. In a sense where the whole act is what? It's nafl, it's sunnah. You still need to maintain the order of the sunan and the arkan. And the same thing in wudu. The sunan of wudu need to be maintained. However, Al-Mawardi and Al-Shashi, they transmit a second wajh. It's pretty interesting. And they said the tartib of the sunan is only sunnah in the second wajh. So they said that if you were to do, for example, the madmada and istinshaq before washing the kaffain, or the istinshaq before the madmada, then the sunnah has been completed and it is correct. Now, Al-Mawardi and Al-Shashi, they both said that the Mu'tamad opinion is the first one, like Imam Nawawi had already stated. Okay, so we already know the Mu'tamad. But does this have an impact on the Sunan later on? It does. And inshallah, after we're done with the shurut and after we're done with wudu and we get into the in-depth study of the Sunan of Wudu, and there's hundreds, we're going to see Al-Ramli and Ibn Hajar differ on some acts, doing one thing before the other, and it goes back to this discussion. Because remember, the khilafat, the difference of opinion between Ibn Hajar and Ramli are not from their own doing. They exist in the madhab already. Always keep this in mind, because a lot of people will come and say, oh, you people are now no longer Shafi'i, you're Rafi'i Nawi, or you're Haytami and the Ramli. It's not true. None of these four people make up their own mind. They all are relying on what's already there. Yes, Nawawi does tarjih, but he's doing tarjih to what's already there. Keep that in mind. And the next shart is al-ilm bi-fardiyatih, meaning you need to know what's fard and you need to know what's sunnah. So if you doubt that one of the acts that you are doing is a fard, is a rukn, is wajib, right? Then technically it would not be accepted from you. Now in our next one, which we'll start inshallah in our next recording, which Allah ya'taqid anna fard min furudihi sunnah. We're going to get into a little bit more detail on this, because it's really hard for the average person to be able to distinguish, right? And they might forget, and they might misunderstand or misrepresent or not grasp what is a fard and what is a rukn. And we'll continue inshallah ta'ala in our next session, bi'idhnillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.